Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to No Final Bell. As you'll notice, I am not here with Jason. He unfortunately just has a lot going on with work, and he's not quite able to make it for our podcast. But as you know, life happens, and as the famous saying goes, the show must go on. So here I am. We're going to be getting into a lot today. We have New Japan Battle in the Valley to talk about. We'll be talking about Impact Hard to Kill, as well as this past week's AEW Dynamite and Rampage. Now, I will not be talking about this past Dynamite, which just happened by the time you're watching this. That will be next week. And actually, matter of fact, Revolution is literally this Sunday, so I'm not too sure what Jason's situation will be, but if we can find a way to discuss it, we'll be here. We'll be talking about it. But as it stands right now, I'm not too sure what the situation is going to be. But I do know that Revolution is this Sunday. But either way, let's get right into Battle in the Valley. So we'll be talking about the pre-show first and then the main show. On the pre-show, we had two matches, first of which being Alex Coughlin versus Kratos, and Alex Coughlin beat Kratos. Then we had David Finlay versus Bobby Fish. Folks, where's the lie? David Finlay beat Bobby Fish. Then for the main show, we start off with a big 8-man tag as Kushida, Volador Jr., Kevin Knight, and DKC took on Mascara Dorada, Josh Alexander, Adrian Quest, and Rocky Romero. And the team of Kushida beat the team of Josh Alexander. And then after the match, Rocky Romero and Volador start to brawl, and Kushida started getting heated with Josh Alexander. And apparently, Volador challenged Rocky Romero to lose his hair. So what they were saying on commentary of like, oh, I'm trying to translate to Spanish. I think he said something about losing his hair. Okay. Then we have the first of, I believe it said 5. Yes. Yes, the first of 5 championship matches. Kenta versus Fred Rother for the New Japan Strong Openweight title. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new New Japan Strong Openweight champion in Kenta, the first Japanese-born Strong Openweight champion. Then we have the Strong Openweight Tag Team titles on the line as the Motor City Machine Guns take on the West Coast Wrecking Crew, the team of Royce Isaacs and Jarrell Nelson. And if you don't remember Royce Isaacs, he was in a tag team at one point in the NWA with none other than Tom Latimer. So, interesting little piece of history there. But either way, Motor City Machine Guns beat the West Coast Wrecking Crew to retain. The next match was a very highly anticipated match for Battle in the Valley. Eddie Kingston versus Jay White in a loser leaves New Japan match. And Eddie Kingston beat Jay White. So Jay White no longer a part of New Japan Pro Wrestling. His contract literally expired a few days ago. So at this point, where he goes, completely just nobody knows. At this point, signs are saying, like, people are saying, oh, signs are pointing that he's going to go to WWE. Signs are pointing that he's going to go to AEW. Signs are pointing that he's going to go to Impact. Like, he has so many options available to him that you don't even know where he could end up. But regardless, then after the match, Jay White gets hit with a shillelagh by David Finlay, and he says he wants what Jay White had. So Moving on, we have Filthy Tom Lawler versus Homicide in a filthy rules fight, meaning there's absolutely no rules, there's no ropes. They took apart the entire ring, so essentially it's just a mat with no ropes, just the ring post. And as I would have expected, Tom Lawler beat Homicide in a filthy rules match. Next matchup is for the New Japan Pro Wrestling World Television title between Zack Sabre Jr., the champion, and Clark Connors. And as you would have expected, Zack Sabre Jr. retained and beat Clark Connors to retain the New Japan World Television title. And after the match, it seems that Kevin Knight of the LA Dojo wants a shot at Zack Sabre Jr. And then we have another highly anticipated match for Battle in the Valley. Mercedes Moné, formerly Sasha Banks, taking on Kairi for the IWGP Women's title. And in a shocking bit of business, Mercedes Moné beat Kairi to become the new IWGP Women's Champion. And then in the main event of Battle in the Valley, Kazuchika Okada versus Hiroshi Tanahashi, the ace of New Japan. Kazuchika Okada, still your IWGP World Champion. That is New Japan Battle in the Valley. Now we get on to Impact No Surrender. We'll start with Battle in the Valley. We'll start with the pre-show, essentially the countdown, and then we'll go into the main show. The countdown starts with a one-off match between Gazelle Shaw and Deonna Purrazzo. Gazelle Shaw beats Deonna Purrazzo with the help of Savannah Evans. Then we have what I would consider a very, very highly anticipated match, and it kind of sucks that it was on the countdown, but regardless, both men were on the card. Jonathan Gresham versus Speedball Mike Bailey. And it was a hard-hitting, back-and-forth contest between both men, but ultimately Jonathan Gresham got the win over Speedball. Then we kick off No Surrender with Frankie Kazarian versus Khan of the Design, and Frankie Kazarian beats Khan with the help of Callahan. Callahan had a chair on the outside. He was aiming for Frankie Kazarian. He didn't realize that Kazarian had reversed, so Callahan hit Khan with the chair to cost Khan the match against Kazarian. Then we have the Knockouts tag team titles on the line. Death Dolls versus the Hex of Allison Kay and Marty Bell. Death Dolls retain. Then we have a dot combat match, which basically, if you don't know, a dot combat match is basically a no disqualification / no holds barred match with a lot of computer / digital media themed weapons. So there were keyboards, computer mice, there was a Sega Dreamcast in the match. It was between Joe Hendry and Moose. And also, I did not have this written down, but in the match, Joe Hendry put a VR headset on Moose, and we got a glimpse of Dancing Moose. I believe in Moose dancing. So, but with that, Joe Hendry beat Moose. Then we have it was weird. There's not a lot to talk about with this, and I don't quite know how to get across this, but we had Busted Open Live with Bully Ray, Tommy Dreamer, and Dave LaGreca. Busted Open Live ends with Bully Ray spilling, because essentially what it was building, what the whole point of this segment was Bully Ray and Tommy Dreamer hashing out their beef on a live Busted Open in front of the Impact crowd. But it didn't really get its point across other than to set up an angle for a match between Bully Ray and Tommy Dreamer. So yeah, with that, Busted Open Live ends with Bully Ray spilling coffee in Tommy Dreamer's eyes, shoving Dave LaGreca to the ground, and then asking Tommy what he means by somebody like him. Because essentially, like, Tommy Dreamer is like, oh yeah, there's a special place in my heart or something like that for somebody like you. Somebody like you is not, I wouldn't, you sink too low for an apology. I wouldn't expect an apology from somebody like you, kind of thing. So next we have a number one contenders fatal four-way match. It consisted of Heath, Trey Miguel, PCO, and Steve Macklin. And Steve Macklin earning his shot at the Impact World Championship, and honestly, well deserved. Like, and that's the thing, when Bound for Glory happened, and they had the Call Your Shot Gauntlet Battle Royale, he was in the final two with Bully Ray. Steve Macklin should have won it, not for nothing. But after the match, Trey Miguel comes down to complain about not being on the card, talks down PCO, who is still reeling from a beatdown by Eddie Edwards, but springs back up and takes out Trey. PCO is not human, folks. We get on to a six-man tag team match between the Bullet Club with Kenta, the New Japan Strong Openweight Champion. He came out with the belt during the show. Too sweet. Bullet Club beats Time Machine. Then we have the first of two main event matches. The first being Mickie James versus Masha Slamovich for the Knockout World title. And as I would have expected, Mickie James beat Masha Slamovich to retain. Although, where do you go from here if you're Masha Slamovich? I mean, you technically at this point already had two opportunities to challenge for the world title for the knockout in the knockout division, and both times you have lost. I mean, sure, you can probably still like build her up to eventually challenge again, like whoever the champion is, but at the same time, it's like I said, you've already had like two opportunities to challenge, and you've lost both times. Kind of makes you look a little weak. Not for nothing. But regardless, now we get on to the main event of the main show for Hard to Kill. Josh Alexander versus Rich Swann. Rich Swann has worked 2 years and too damn long to get this opportunity once again to challenge for the World Championship. This time against his very good friend, Josh Alexander. And, a lot of people were looking at it as like, man, I think this might be Rich's time. I think this might be Rich Swann's time. I think he might actually be the world champion once again. Well, it would have seemed like the perfect storybook ending for Josh Alexander's championship reign. But unfortunately, that is not how it ended. Ladies and gentlemen, Josh Alexander is still your Impact World Champion. And I even said this myself. I really think that Impact is going to give Josh Alexander the a championship reign with the world title for over a year. Like, at this point, he's already the longest reigning Impact World Champion in history. But I think they're going to go that extra mile with Josh Alexander, and I think they're actually going to give him a year-long title reign, because he won it off of Moose last year at Rebellion. So at this point, I really think it's going to come down to, okay, we have our world champion here who's already the longest reigning world champion, but let's have him make even more history. Let's have him hold the Impact World Championship for over a year, or even up to a year. But regardless, that is Hard to Kill for that is news and talk for Hard to Kill. Now we get on to AEW Dynamite and Rampage. We start off Dynamite with an AEW All-Atlantic Championship match, which unfortunately we did not watch the Dynamite and Rampage from the week before, so we did not see on Rampage that they announced Orange Cassidy would be taking on Wheeler Yuta for the AEW All-Atlantic title, but regardless, that's where we're at. For Dynamite, we open the show with this for the AEW All-Atlantic title between Orange Cassidy and Wheeler Yuta. Very back-and-forth match, but ultimately, Orange Cassidy got the win over Wheeler Yuta, and there were a lot of moments where you thought maybe Wheeler Yuta could become a double champion in two different companies, both backed by Tony Khan. But that did not happen. Next, we have a segment with Ricky Starks, who claims he is moving on from Chris Jericho, but has an open contract for a match at Revolution, to which Chris Jericho comes out to interrupt Ricky and says that Ricky is not on his level. Peter Avalon then comes out to seemingly answer the challenge, but Jericho hits him with a Judas effect, comes down to the ring, signs the open contract. He had the pen in his hand, he clicked it, to which the crowd popped because, the list of Jericho and everything like that. Signs the open contract for a match against Ricky Starks at Revolution, with JAS being banned from ringside. Because basically, Ricky Starks, the whole thing with that is Jericho wanted to prove to Ricky Starks, and more so Ricky Starks wanted Jericho to prove to Ricky that he himself could win a match without needing help from the Jericho Appreciation Society. So next up we have a tag team match between the Acclaimed versus Lee Moriarty and Big Bill, and even with outside interference from the Ass Boys, the Guns. I'm still gonna call them the Ass Boys because scissor me daddy ass. But regardless, even with outside interference from the Ass Boys, the Acclaimed beat Lee Moriarty and Big Bill. Going into the next segment here, Tony Schiavone was set to interview Christian Cage, but Jungle Boy Jack Perry beats him down on the stage and was going to give Christian a concerto, but then Christian hits Jack Perry with a low blow, hits him with a chair, busting him open. And at this point, we now know that at Revolution, Jack Perry will face Christian Cage in a no-holds-barred match. Initially, I saw that it was supposed to be like Buried Alive, but now it's no holds barred. Either way, we have a stipulation match on the card, another stipulation match, I should say, on the card for Revolution, because at this point we now have 3 stipulation matches at Revolution so the first of which being that 60-minute Iron Man match between MJF and Bryan Danielson. Then we have a Texas Death Match between Jon Moxley and Hangman Adam Page. Now we have this no holds barred between Jungle Boy Jack Perry and Christian Cage. So, but moving on, Saraya beats Sky Blue. Not much to talk about there. And then after the match, they were going to spray paint on Sky Blue, but then Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter came down to make the save for Sky Blue, but then Ruby Soho comes out to point at Jamie and her title. So we still don't quite know where Ruby Soho's trust and where her allegiance lies when it comes to that. But it's safe to say that Ruby Soho certainly wants her hands on a championship, and not for nothing. When it comes to Ruby Soho and championships, it's she really hasn't had a lot of luck in that area, especially in AEW, because first she won, like when she debuted in the company, she came in, won the women's casino battle royale, automatically got her opportunity to challenge at the time Britt Baker for the world title, didn't win, then had months to go after. Then a few months go by, she's in the TBS Championship tournament, and she's in the finals against Jade Cargill. Loses that match to Jade Cargill, and then she's got a few months go by. Now she's once again challenging for the world championship. And at this point, when do you pull the trigger? When do you pull the trigger with Ruby Soho and give her a world championship, or even just a championship in general in AEW? Because that's where you failed with then Ruby Riott in WWE. Because she had such a great run in WWE, and it's a sin that she never won even a tag team title in WWE with like the Riott Squad when it was just her and Liv. And even more so, it's a sin that she never won a singles championship in WWE. And now she's here in AEW, and it's like, it seemed like it was going to be a good signing for Ruby Soho in AEW, but then it just turned into like, oh yeah, she's just another woman on the roster at this point. It's like, well, now she's once again in that position of challenging the world champion. So at this point, it just comes down to like, when are you going to have her win a championship in AEW? Whether it be the TBS title or the world title. Like, she's got to win at least one championship in AEW before her time there, like, comes to an end. Now, I know a lot of people have come and gone in AEW that didn't win a title. Specifically Joey Janela and, Stu Grayson and Marco Stunt. But, like, no disrespect to them, but like their situation is different because they weren't really valued that much in the company in general. So, it's different when you're valued and then when you're not. I would at least hope that Ruby Soho is somewhat valued in AEW and that she can at least because, she's challenged, like I said, she's challenged twice for 2 different titles. So there's that. But let's move on to the next segment. MJF talks about his fiance leaving him because he is unlovable, and the only thing that brings him love is the AEW World title, and it's the only thing stopping him from grabbing a fistful of pills and ending his life. Some deep stuff. And says that the reason he hates Bryan Danielson is because every time Bryan steps into a ring, he takes family for granted, which he's probably not wrong when he says that. But then he looks to the camera to talk to Bryan's children. MJF has made things personal, and then they brawl in the ring and outside the ring. So the match at Revolution is definitely, now that MJF has made things personal, it's definitely gonna, and we'll talk about what happened on this past Dynamite. Well, actually, let's just say it. Bryan Danielson on this past Dynamite was talking down MJF, and then obviously it was censored on the TBS version, but on Fight TV internationally, everybody was able to hear Bryan Danielson tell MJF that he was going to kick his fucking head in. So, there's that. And then we have Jamie Hayter backstage. She proposes a three-way match at Revolution for the Women's World Title, and I do believe it is actually going to happen at Revolution. It's going to be, I believe, Jamie Hayter versus Saraya versus Ruby Soho at Revolution for the Women's World Title. But then we have the Revolution Tag Team Battle Royal, where it's kind of like the Casino Battle Royal, which happened this past Dynamite, which was won by Orange Cassidy and Danhausen, so they are now going to Revolution to face the Acclaimed and Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal, as well as the Ass Boys, the Guns, for the tag team titles at Revolution. But regardless, so yeah, I kind of slipped that in there. So yes, Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett did win the Revolution Tag Team Battle Royal. Truthfully, this next thing, I don't really truthfully want to talk about it, but at the same time, it's like, I know I have to. Tony Khan, along with Adam Cole, announced a new show called AEW All Access, and it will feature such talents as Adam Cole, baby. So, there is that. And then in the main event of Dynamite, we have Jon Moxley versus Evil Uno. And, I was actually surprised for the entire match, Jon Moxley did not bleed. But, spoiler alert, it wasn't until after the match that he bled. But yeah, so during the match, it was actually Evil Uno that bled. But, with that, Jon Moxley beat Evil Uno, but then Moxley does not let go of the, sleeper hold or the Bulldog choke. And then it brings out Dark Order and BCC, Blackpool Combat Club. But then Hangman Adam Page comes out to brawl with Mox ahead of their Texas Death Match at Revolution, and that's when Moxley bled. Because Moxley can't go a single freaking week without bleeding. Like, at this point, what does it add to any story that is, there? What is it at? But, so that is Dynamite. Then we get on to Rampage. We start off with the Young Bucks versus Aussie Open. What a hell of a freaking match, man, that you had on Rampage, of all things. You had it on Rampage, which was yeah. But either way, so Young Bucks beat Aussie Open, and then after the match, the House of Black come out to play mind games with the Elite. And we do know now that at Revolution, it will be the Young Bucks, or I'm sorry, the Elite versus the House of Black for the World Trios titles. That should be a great match. A lot of build-up has happened with this. And matter of fact, on the last Dynamite that we had, the Elite were set to make their entrance. And the ultimate heel move that House of Black did was they cut off Carry On Wayward Son. And everybody was pissed. But regardless, they held up those trios titles. And it's like, hey, we're here. We want those titles. And honestly, I look at it this way, man. The House of Black should be going after the trios titles anyways, because they initially challenged for the trios titles back in Buffalo. It was the fallout from All Out 2022, where unfortunately the Elite got suspended and they had to forfeit the trios titles. And it was an impromptu match. The trios match between Death Triangle and the House of Black turned into a match for the trios titles, to which, Death Triangle won, and ever since then, you haven't really seen the House of Black entering that trios title picture. Now, they're in that picture, and it makes perfect sense, because it's like, man, like, you just got to do something with the House of Black, and now you are. So, that's good. But, next we have the Best Friends backstage who are talking about the Casino Tag Team Battle Royal, but then get beaten down by Big Bill, Lee Moriarty, and the Ass Boys, the Guns. Then we get into the next match. Toni Storm beats Willow Nightingale, and then after the match, they were about to spray paint Willow, but then Ruby Soho comes down to make the save. Whose side is she truly on? Then we get Jamie Hayter, who comes down and beats up Saraya and Toni Storm. Next thing that happened is Lance Archer beat some jobber. It was his big return on to AEW and to TV, and then it's like, oh yeah, they just gave him a jobber, which, But more importantly, Jake the Snake Roberts is back with Lance Archer. And like, man, it's just good to see that Jake the Snake is in relatively good health and he's still kicking, man, because I'm pretty sure recently he did have a bit of a health scare, but regardless, like I said, it's good to see that Jake the Snake is still around, still moving, still just overall a good asset to the company, I should say. But yeah, it's good to see that Jake the Snake is doing well. And then we get to the main event. Sammy Guevara versus Action Andretti. And it was a relatively, I look at it this way, is I feel like the match went on too long when it didn't really need to be. Because if I remember correctly, the match went through one or two picture-in-picture breaks. And it's why? Why did this match need to go through a picture-in-picture break? Or even two picture-in-picture breaks? Why? I don't get it. But either way, Sammy Guevara got the win over Action Andretti with the help of Daniel Garcia. And speaking of Daniel Garcia, it's man, at this point, a lot of people have started to lose interest in Daniel Garcia, which makes a lot of sense because he was red hot. Excuse me. He had a period of time during that whole Jericho Appreciation Society and Blackpool Combat Club thing. Daniel Garcia at that point was red hot. And I don't know why Tony Khan just didn't decide to pull the trigger on having Daniel Garcia be a part of the the Blackpool Combat Club. They decided to stick him around, they decided to have him stick around in the damn Jericho Appreciation Society, and it's nobody is getting invested in Daniel Garcia anymore. They were invested in him when he was going through that crisis period of do I stay with Jericho Appreciation Society or do I go to the Blackpool Combat Club? Because Bryan Danielson is my hero, but yet I appreciate Chris Jericho. It's where do I go? But yeah, either way, this is a rather short episode of No Final Bell, and that's going to conclude. That's going to put an end to it right here. If you haven't already, please follow us down here on social media at Tinkle Sports. Make sure to follow the channel right here, Tinkle Sports Entertainment. Our show is Our show is right here. No final bell. Usually with Jason and with myself and Jason, but like I said, Jason is not here. He's just got a lot going on with work. But he should be back for next week's episode. If not, I'll be right here. But speaking of Tinkle, make sure to check out all of our other programs and all of our other podcasts. We have Sunday Morning Tinkle every Sunday at 9 a.m. We have Auto Turn 4 every Tuesday at 5 p.m. This show usually is every Wednesday at 5 p.m., but, with schedule and work restraints, we're kind of just, going with the flow, kind of just putting out an episode when we can. This episode will probably air later today, by the time I'm recording this, on Friday, maybe at 5 p.m. I'm not too sure. I'm still figuring out everything. But regardless, that is going to conclude this episode. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Goodbye, everyone.